Hey guys, it's Dad. Today I want to talk about two mammoths in the MMO genre, World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV. Even though the director of Final Fantasy XIV has acknowledged that it would not exist without WoW, saying Blizzard is definitely aware of this, but without World of Warcraft, A Realm Reborn wouldn't exist. We find ourselves at a point where criticizing WoW is cool, but criticizing FF14 is taboo. Now, I'll admit that the WoW development team has previously made some questionable choices in some designs and stories, but does that mean that the entire game is bad? On the other side of things, is FF14 a perfect game? With World of Warcraft's new expansion, Dragonflight, coming up and pre-patch already in full swing, I want to look at these two games and see what each one offers. We'll look at many areas of comparison from both games and see where each game succeeds and where they fall flat. This is not a point tally system where there will be a decided winner at the end, since one good idea is not equivalent to the other. This is just my opinion, nothing more. I'm not perfect and may make some mistakes in this process, but I'll do my best. Now, you probably noticed I added part 1 to the title of this video. When I started this project, it was pretty small, but as I wrote it and added more categories, I realized it was getting too long for a single video. So now it's a multi-part project that will be released over a period of time. With that said, let's jump into part 1 and take a look at the first category. So I want to talk about some simple things that you'll encounter before getting into the game. I know these are small potatoes, but bear with me. So the first thing that I want to look at is the game launchers. I'll be honest, when I look at the Final Fantasy launcher, I get Windows 98 vibes. It just looks kinda old. Not much can be done within the Final Fantasy XIV launcher itself, like shopping or looking at patch notes, since everything takes you to an external website. I will say the art is nice and it does list a lot of information in one small window. One additional downside is that the launcher doesn't auto-sign you in when opened and only updates the game after you sign in. Now, looking at the Warcraft launcher, it looks much more polished. You can see your friends list and if they're online, as well as message them from outside the game. You are able to shop and look at patch notes without opening additional windows. The launcher also auto-updates the game when opened or while running in the background, since it auto-signs you in. Now, I'm a little ashamed to admit that when I first started playing FF14, I had to have some friends walk me through how to set up my subscription. It's not impossible to figure out, but a little confusing since they have multiple websites, but I'll get to those in a second. I know I'm not the only person who's run into issues trying to give Square Enix money. But once you're in the right place and going through the subscription setup, it gives you some options to choose to extend your subscription at a lower monthly cost, but all up front. Looking at Warcraft, if you're creating an account or setting up a subscription, it can all be done through the launcher, every part. And that goes back to the great design of the Warcraft launcher. It's just so much more user-friendly. Similar to FF14, they also offer extended subscription options at a lower monthly cost. As mentioned previously, we're going to take a short look at the game's websites. A quick note, I promise I have good things to say about FF14, and we will get there. I just have issues with their out-of-game designs, starting with the websites. Looking at the FF14 sites, they may be separate, but they share a common theme. They look like something I would have made in my first web design class in high school, and that was a while ago. They get the job done for sure, but honestly look sketchy. I was nervous the first time I put my credit card information in there. It's not immediately clear which site you need to log into to pay for the game. Like the other out-of-game experiences, going over to the Warcraft website, again, it just looks much more polished and is easy to navigate. While on these sites, we can jump right into stores and look at microtransactions and services, although you can access these things through the Warcraft launcher as well, just saying. Simply looking at what is available, one thing is obvious. Final Fantasy's selection absolutely blows the Warcraft selection out of the water. Warcraft does have some nice pets, mounts, and toys to pick from, but you could literally spend hours looking through all the outfits and decorations that FF14 has to offer. Let's take a quick look at some of the basic services and the cost comparison. A name change in Warcraft costs $10, and over in Final Fantasy XIV, it also costs $10, so they match. Now, a server transfer in Warcraft is $25, whereas a server transfer in FF14 is $18, so Final Fantasy offers a lower price. But here's where it gets interesting. In Warcraft, a race change is $25. That's a hefty price. In Final Fantasy, a Fantasia only costs $10 to do the same thing. The reason I said it gets interesting is because this savings depends entirely on what you want to accomplish. Fantasia allows you to change everything about your character, including your race, face, and gender, at one low cost. Now with Warcraft, although a race change costs so much more, the barbershop inside the game allows you to change your appearance whenever you want, at no cost, as many times as you want. You can basically remake your character from scratch, everything you did in the initial character creation aside from race, including gender, known now as body type 1 and 2. FF14 also has a barbershop that can be unlocked through a quest line that allows you to change quite a few features of your character, but not size, facial features, skin color, or gender. Additional hairstyles can be unlocked or purchased, then used at this barbershop for a small fee. Warcraft arguably has a much more polished look to their launcher and website. They look well made and safe to use. I'll say that Final Fantasy definitely has a much larger option of items to buy from in many categories, but is that a good thing? Like it or not, Warcraft has a lot less of its overall mounts, pets, and cosmetics held behind a paywall. Just some food for thought. This is an area where things really start leaning the other way. I'm going to start this one off with World of Warcraft. The first thing you will do is choose your faction, race, body type, and class. Once you've done this, you move on to customization. From here, you can change things like skin color, a small selection of faces, hairstyles, and colors, and some race-specific features. There's a few categories of changes you can dig into, and it moves on to things like piercings, tattoos, and body paints. One big thing to keep in mind here is that all of this can be changed later at the barbershop. Now, once you name your character, you're ready to jump into the world of Warcraft. I'm sorry I had to. One additional thing to add is that different races have different perks, like Pandarans taking less fall damage and Undead having underwater breathing. Now with that said, let's look at what FF14 offers for character customization. Unfortunately, you can't alter your character's appearance at all, and there's only 4 presets to choose from. Obviously I'm kidding, and FF14 offers the exact opposite, which is a staggering amount of customization. You start by choosing your race and gender. I will add that Final Fantasy also has racial bonuses in the form of stats, but they won't have a huge impact in the game later on. When looking at your character, you can choose different backgrounds to see what they would look like in a well-lit building, the woods, or simply standing in a void. Once you've gone through these choices and landed on one, you get to choose between clans which alter your starting attributes and starting look. Once you hit confirm, make sure you have some time set aside for this because you could be on the screen for hours, and that's not a bad thing. If you really don't care about what you look like, you can hit randomize at the top of the screen. Otherwise, take your time going through each category. I won't touch on everything because there's so much you can do, from changing the size of your body, jaw, eyes, and mouth. Want a short, jacked dude with a pompadour and white lips? Why not? Customize for hours. And by the way, that pompadour, it bounces. There's also a large list of voices to choose from. After that, you get to set your birthday and patron deity. Only now do you choose your job. Now keep in mind, each job has a specific starting zone, so remember this when starting with friends, but I'll touch on that later. After all that, name your character, and you're all set. I do want to briefly mention my approach to character customization in both games. I've played many different characters over the years in Warcraft, but my main has always been an orc warrior. Yep, I'm a horde player. In Final Fantasy, I tried a few races, but ultimately landed on a bunny girl. And might I say, she has some snazzy outfits. Now in this section, let's look at the process of making your gear look the way you want it to. In Final Fantasy, you need to complete the questline If I Had a Glamour found in Vesper Bay. Once you've done this, you can start glamoring in your inn. You will use special crystals to add gear items into your glamour dresser. Currently, you can only store a total of 800 items regardless of type. Once you've added your items, you're ready to edit your glamour plates. The developers have raised the limit up to a total of 20 plates, so create some cool or even ridiculous outfits. A huge part of the glamour system in FF14 is the ability to collect dyes and apply them to most gear pieces. My personal favorite is lingerie with a pig head. Don't judge me. It's fantastic in MSQ when it shows the whole party. Once you have created some glamour plates, you can access them from anywhere through the character screen. Switch them as many times as you want, from anywhere. One downside of the system is that once you add the item into the glamour dresser, it cannot be used as equipped gear until you restore it with a different kind of crystal. If you want to hide a piece of gear, you'll need special items from the Emperor's New Gear set. This isn't a big deal, as they can be purchased pretty cheaply from a vendor, so don't buy them on the market board. Going over to Warcraft, instead of going to an inn, you'll need to find a transmogrifier in a main city using your minimap or by talking to a guard and asking for directions. Or even better, use your trusty Grand Expedition Yak, which allows you to access transmogging from anywhere. Warcraft approaches storing transmog gear a little differently. Anytime you loot soulbound gear or equip BOE gear, it's added into your collection. The only limit is what you have unlocked, since there is no cap on the collection. I'm not sure how many pieces in total you can have unlocked, but it's massive. When it comes to transmog sets, you can unlock full gear sets or customize your own. The current limit to custom transmogging sets, just like FF14, is 20. A nice feature is hiding gear pieces. You can do this without obtaining hidden gear pieces, and it's free to do. The downside is that applying transmogs costs gold every time. This can take a toll on players that don't have much gold. My favorite custom set on my warrior is the Yeti Jammy set with huge Darkmoon Fair mallets with a frosty effect. If you haven't caught on yet, I take my game appearances very seriously. A fun social feature that's only in Final Fantasy XIV is Adventure Plates. This plate will show your current job unless you want it to show your favorite one. It will show your free company name and symbol, your schedule should you choose to disclose it, a fun quote by you, and the best part, the portrait. You can edit the background, framing, expression, pose, ambient lighting, the works. Get it set exactly the way you want, because if anyone is like me, they will check your adventure plate. When I'm standing out waiting for fets, I like to look at random adventure plates. That is until I accidentally invite some random person to a party. Whoops. Comparing the two, Warcraft does have more freedom with storing your transmog gear, but FF14 excels by far in these areas. After creating your character in either game, it's important we touch on character identity, which is approached differently in each game. In Final Fantasy XIV, it's incredibly common to have a single character that you do everything on. In most MMOs, you typically have alts, or alternate characters, but not in FF14. You can run every class known as a job on one character and switch whenever you want. This can be a good thing if you enjoy playing every aspect of the game on one character. In Warcraft, it's pretty common to run alts, meaning you will create a new character for each class. Now here's where there's a problem for me. In FF14, it almost feels like a punishment to run another character. Nothing is shared like your mounts, pets, or achievements. In Warcraft, those things are shared across your whole account. I've leveled every class in Warcraft, but I usually play a small group of characters. I have my warrior, my shaman, my mage, and my hunter. Although they are mostly orcs, which is my favorite race, they feel like entirely different people to me, and I enjoy going from my serious orc warrior to my playful Pandaren mage. I tried making alts in FF14, but found out pretty quickly that I should just pick one. It really comes down to how you want your characters to experience the world. It's totally okay to lock into one character and flesh them out entirely, just as it's cool to explore the world through different eyes. But when it comes down to it, I personally prefer running several characters and making each one unique. Once you have made your character and get logged in, how does the game look? I'm not going to be talking about add-ons that change appearances and only focusing on what's built into the game. We'll briefly discuss add-ons later. This will help bring an even playing field. As far as graphics go, that's a tough one, since each game has a very different art style. When looking at Warcraft, it has nice zone art and distant textures like the sky and mountains. They definitely take more of a cartoony approach, which can allow for some freedom with textures. That said, although they have been updating some zones, if you fly above some of the trees, some areas just don't look right. When looking at Final Fantasy, they seem to aim for a more realistic approach in textures, which can be nice. Rock and tree textures look good, and there's a ton of different patterns for things like stone and brick. But I will say that when you get close to some of the bushes, they can look pretty weird. Both games allow for adjusting tons of settings like shadows and water, but one thing that seems to only be in Warcraft is view distance. Maybe I'm completely missing it, but I can't find it anywhere and Googling didn't help. View distance can be huge for some players to adjust for system performance. Another thing I want to talk about in FF14 is this distant fog. When standing in the Imperium looking over the edge, it's just a white void. I'm not sure why they did this, but it kind of breaks immersion for me. When I look in the distance, I see mountains, so why is down just nothing? And when you're looking down in this void, the structures of the buildings seem to just go on forever. A big way to bring in or retain players is through cinematics, mainly for new expansions. When it comes to cinematics, I'll keep this simple. I believe both games knock it out of the park. The Dragonflight cinematic is phenomenal. The Endwalker cinematic is phenomenal. They both just look amazing. I'm going to touch on music in a bit, but I do want to point out that they approach music differently in these trailers. For Warcraft, it's more of a simple approach and setting the tone based on what's happening at each moment. Now for FF14, it's a full banger with lyrics. Now the positive side of this is that the Footfall song has been stuck in my head. The downside is that this can be a bit much and a little distracting, but more on that in a bit. I'm not going to dig into this one very much because this could be its own video, but I have a mouse with 12 buttons on the left side and I like to have a custom interface that mirrors the layout of those buttons. Both games allow for custom positioning of bars and other elements while being able to change the size and orientation. I'm able to create the 3x4 button layout to match my mouse nicely in both interfaces. Everyone has different preferences and UI setup, so have a blast with yours and get it set just right. Chat is obviously a key component in gameplay and communication. The nice thing is that both games offer the ability to move the chat box anywhere and resize it. You're able to adjust message types to any color and font size. You can also disable chat types if you don't want to see them. One nice thing in the chat boxes by default is the combat log for Warcraft or the battle tab in FF14. This allows you to see what you did in combat and what happened to you. The main thing I use this for is when I die and I'm confused about what happened. You are going to be using these a lot, especially when questing. Both games have simple and sleek mini-maps that are easy to use and read, though the FF14 minimap does lack in-terrain textures. You are able to set both maps to rotate with your character if you so choose. When it comes to the main map, this is where I run into some issues. The Warcraft map is quite intuitive and easy to navigate. Left click goes in, right click goes out, all the way until you can see everything. Or you can use the bar at the top to go back to a level, or use the drop downs at the top to quickly select a preferred zone or continent. With the FF14 map, it takes more getting used to. There's so many zones with unique names and navigating through them isn't as easy as left clicking in and right clicking out. And like the minimap, it could use more textures and colors that represent the terrain. In both games, you were able to ping the main map and link it into chat. However, only in Warcraft can you ping the minimap for your party members. Wrapping up this area, both games are similar in approach to the UI and chat. It's going to come down to design and art preference. While the textures in FF14 look amazing, I also really enjoy the more cartoon design of Warcraft. Sometimes when you try and make things look too real and miss, they can look really weird. As for the maps, Warcraft takes that one by a long shot. I'm not going to talk about all of the zones and cities, but just a handful. We have already touched on the different art styles, but Warcraft and FF14 both have some really boring zones. In Warcraft, on the Horde side, early in your questing, you may find yourself in the Barrens found in central Kalimdor, and the zone is exactly that, barren. There's not much to see other than the occasional mountain, tree, or hut. Some may try and rush through this zone, or skip it entirely. Over in Final Fantasy, I found myself in the Segoli Desert in southern Thanalan. The place truly is a desert with stretches of nothing but sand. They were going for realism and definitely found it, but the place is overly simple and riddled with the unfortunate shape of the sandworms. Now these are both zones from early in each game's history, and they were going for a certain barren vibe, but they can be incredibly boring compared to other areas. A positive side would be that as you head south in the Barrens towards the Southern Barrens, you'll find a lush and bright environment since the Cataclysm split the zone in two. Similarly, as you head northwest from the Segole Desert, you'll find the vibrant Forgotten Springs. So in both games, when you find yourself in a dull area, you're not far from something more interesting. I don't want to talk just bad here, let's look at some good. Starting with Warcraft and the Shadowlands expansion, whether Horde or Alliance, you'll find yourself venturing through Ardenweald. As you work your way through this zone, there's richness from top to bottom with life found everywhere. Filled with amazing beasts, glowing ponds, and spiraling trees that look like they hold galaxies in their branches, and beyond them a starry sky of swirls of constellations and light. At the center of the zone is the heart of the forest, the central hub for those that chose the Night Fae as their covenant. Stepping back outside and mounting up, the zone looks just as amazing when flying over it. In Final Fantasy, while going through the MSQ, you'll quest through Ilmeg. Surrounded by towering mountains that are covered with glowing crystals, there's a mansion perched over a beautiful lake spattered with colorful lily pads. The zone is filled with fairies, puffy white trees, and floating spiraling flowers. Depending on the time of the day, the sky will be bright and sunny but partly cloudy, or a very realistic starry night with a lovely moon watching over you. So both games have their dull zones and their stunning zones, but let's take a brief look at their cities. No matter what game you're playing, you'll likely spend a lot of time in different cities, so I'll briefly look at a couple cool ones. Warcraft's current expansion added Oribos as its main city, lying at the center of the Shadowlands. With its large ceilings and huge doors, you instantly get the feeling that this place was originally made for someone else. With it being a circle, it's easy to navigate and find what you need, whether it's a trainer, vendor, or a simple mailbox. Take one of the portals to head upstairs where you'll find the doorways to other areas of the Shadowlands. Talk to the Flight Master to go through them and continue your journey, or look to the center to the Pillar of Swirling Souls and jump in to follow them to the Maw. We can also look at Dazara Lore, which was the main city for the Horde in the Battle for Azeroth expansion of Warcraft. From the massive pyramid at the center known as the Great Seal, to the bustling shops by the harbor down below, the zone takes influence from real-world cultures and puts you in the middle of it. You can fly anywhere in the city since it's outdoors, even to the top of the Great Seal. Then if you're a demon hunter or have gliders, take the fun path to the docks, the straight path. Now I want to look at some cool and unique cities found in Eorzea. One word: Kugane. As you progress through the main story questline, you'll be back and forth through Kugane many times. There is a heavy Japanese influence here, including the Hingashi emblem using the Japanese symbol Tomoe. The huge detailed structures overlook the busy sidewalks of Kugane with couples walking around together and hopeful warriors training with wooden swords. To the west is a pier with boats waiting to take you to Shirogane. From Kugane, it's a quick teleport to the Crystarium. Massive crystals look down at you from a bright blue sky. They are so tall I can't even tilt high enough to see the top. Traveling from place to place is a quick stop by an Aethernet shard and picking the closest option. The Quadrivium can be found on the south side, which is a huge dome enclosure filled with vendors, quest givers, and market boards. Or head to the east and speak with the Crystarium Gatekeep to make your way into the Ocular if you have business with the Crystal Exarch. With all that said, I think both games have some amazing zones and cities. We all have our own preferences when it comes to layout and design, so I'd say check them all out for yourself and feel it out. Now, if you're still with me, that concludes part 1. Join me in part 2 where we'll discuss music, add-ons, travel, movement, and collectibles. I hope to see you later.